The sound of laughter and crystal glasses drifted from behind the heavy glass doors of the Oceanview Grand Hotel. Elena paused on the marble steps, her heart thrumming against the emerald fabric of her dress. She stood there for a moment, gathering the courage to step inside. It was supposed to be a beautiful evening, the wedding of her husband Daniel's younger sister, a lavish celebration hosted by one of the most prominent families in the city. But for Elena, it felt like walking into a lion's den. The limo that dropped her off had already disappeared down the drive, leaving her alone beneath the soft glow of the golden lamps. She adjusted the strap of her clutch, taking a deep breath as she glanced at her reflection in the tall glass panels. Graceful, elegant, almost unrecognizable. Her gown, a deep green that shimmered with each movement, hugged her figure with understated grace. The satin folds caught the light like rippling water. Her hair was swept into an elegant chignon, exposing the delicate line of her neck. She looked every inch the sophisticated woman society expected her to be. Yet inside she still felt like the girl who once delivered coffee to offices that looked just like this hotel lobby. Daniel had promised he would come. He always promised. Just a quick meeting, love. I'll be there before dinner starts. He'd said that morning, brushing a kiss across her forehead before disappearing into another day of deals and deadlines. Now, as she stood at the threshold, she wasn't sure if that promise meant anything. Elena's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the door. Beyond it lay the gleam of chandeliers and the polished chatter of wealth. Everyone inside would know who she was, the outsider, the wife Daniel married for love, not lineage. The woman his family tolerated but never accepted. A valet in a crisp uniform opened the door for her with a polite smile. Welcome, Mum. The Langley wedding reception. She nodded. Yes. The warmth of the lobby enveloped her like a wave of perfume and candlelight. A grand staircase spiraled upward, and a quartet played soft jazz near the fountain in the center. Guests in designer gowns glided past, their laughter light and practiced. For a moment Elena's breath caught, not from awe, but from the weight of the performance she was about to give. Tonight she had to be perfect, graceful, untouchable. Every smile, every word measured and poised. As she approached the maitre d's stand, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, she whispered to herself like a quiet prayer. You belong here. Even if they don't believe it, you do. Then she lifted her chin, offered her name, and waited for the gates of this glittering battlefield to open. The maitre d', a tall man with silver hair and the posture of a royal butler, scanned the list of guests on his tablet. His expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered once, a subtle sign of uncertainty. Your name once again, ma'am? He asked, his voice smooth and professional. Elena Langley, she repeated, forcing a polite smile. I'm the wife of Daniel Langley. He nodded and typed something on the screen. The seconds stretched painfully. The murmur of laughter and music from the ballroom made the silence at the entrance feel heavier. Elena felt a prickle of unease crawl down her spine. Finally, he looked up, sympathetic but distant. I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Langley. I don't seem to have your name listed for tonight's event. Elena blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. There must be a mistake. My husband. Oh, I'm sure it's just a technical error, he interrupted gently, though his tone carried that faint edge reserved for unwanted guests. Perhaps if you could step aside while I make a quick call. Before she could respond, a voice sweet and sharp as broken glass sliced through the air behind her. Well, that's one way to make an entrance. Elena turned. Her heart sank. Veronica stood in the doorway, Daniel's ex-wife. The woman who had once ruled over every family event like a queen, and who never missed a chance to remind Elena that she would always be a guest in this world. Veronica looked radiant, almost theatrically so. A silver gown hugged her figure, glittering like frost under the chandeliers. Her red lips curved in a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't realize the staff used the main entrance now, Veronica murmured, tilting her head with mock innocence. But then again, maybe they've changed the rules for sentimental reasons. A few nearby guests chuckled softly, pretending not to listen while leaning closer. Elena's cheeks burned. She opened her mouth to reply, but her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a delicate cream-colored envelope embossed with gold lettering. I have an invitation, she said quietly, offering it to the maitre d'. He accepted it with careful fingers, scanning it quickly before frowning. "It appears to be legitimate," he said, more to himself than to her. "One moment, please." As he picked up the phone to verify it, Elena stared down at the polished marble floor. The reflection of her emerald dress wavered beneath her feet like a ghost, fragile, uncertain. She could feel eyes on her. Curious, judgmental, amused. The kind of stare she knew too well. The ones that had followed her years ago when she delivered packages to glossy office buildings and was told to use the back door. Her pulse quickened. For a fleeting second, the memory of cold rain and exhaust fumes replaced the scent of roses and champagne. Back then, she'd promised herself she'd never feel that small again. "Mrs. Langley," the maitre d' said at last, his voice softer now. "I believe there was a clerical mix-up. You are of course expected. My deepest apologies for the delay." He gestured toward the double doors that led into the ballroom. Elena nodded, forcing a polite smile even as her hands trembled slightly. She stepped past Veronica, who leaned close enough to whisper, her perfume sickly sweet. "Enjoy the evening, dear. Just remember, borrowed crowns don't last long." Elena didn't respond. She simply lifted her chin, straightened her shoulders, and walked through the doors into the glittering storm that awaited her. The moment Elena crossed the threshold, the world changed. Soft light spilled from enormous crystal chandeliers, washing the room in a warm golden haze. Laughter mingled with the murmur of music from a live string quartet. Waiters in white gloves glided between tables with trays of champagne, and the air shimmered with perfume and expensive confidence. It was breathtaking and suffocating. Elena's heels sank slightly into the plush carpet as she paused just inside the doorway. Every detail was immaculate. Tall ivory roses in glass vases, flickering candles, the delicate clink of silverware. Yet she felt like an actress stepping onto the wrong stage. Everyone else seemed to know their lines except her. A woman in a crimson dress brushed past, giving Elena a swift, curious glance before whispering something to her companion. The man chuckled quietly. She pretended not to notice. Her fingers tightened around her clutch as she made her way toward a quiet corner near the champagne fountain. The weight of her humiliation at the entrance still clung to her like perfume gone sour. Veronica's voice echoed in her head. "Borrowed crowns don't last long." Elena sipped her drink, letting the bubbles sting her tongue. And then, as often happened when she felt cornered, her mind slipped back to another world. A small gray delivery van. A city soaked in rain. She remembered the ache in her legs from running up staircases with heavy parcels, the way security guards would barely look at her when she asked to sign in. Sometimes they didn't even let her inside. They gestured toward the service entrance, as if her presence might stain the marble floors. She could still feel the chill of those mornings, the cold wind biting her hands, the smell of wet cardboard and gasoline. Once she had delivered a package to this very hotel. She'd waited outside for nearly 20 minutes because no one at the reception believed she belonged there. They'd called her the girl with the boxes, as if she didn't have a name. Now she stood inside wearing silk instead of polyester, her name spoken with polite formality. Yet the memory didn't fade. It pressed against her ribs, whispering that she was still that girl, pretending to fit into a world that wasn't hers. She took another sip of champagne, feeling the warmth rush through her chest. "Don't you dare look down," she whispered under her breath. "Not tonight." The thought of Daniel steadied her. He was the reason she was here, the man who saw something in her when no one else did. The man who once found her in the rain, shivering on the steps of a courier depot, and smiled as if she were made of starlight, not exhaustion. He believed in her, loved her, married her despite the whispers that followed. Elena lifted her chin and set the glass down, the memory of his faith flickering like a candle in the storm. Across the room she caught sight of Daniel's mother, Margaret Langley, tall, elegant, and terrifying in midnight blue silk. Her diamond necklace gleamed like armor. Around her the sisters, Isabel and Claire, laughed too loudly, their champagne glasses catching the light like trophies. Elena could feel their attention shift. The faint, assessing glances. The knowing smiles. Her heart gave a slow, uneasy beat. She straightened her back. Not tonight, she told herself again. Whatever they thought of her, whatever they whispered, she would face it with grace. And so, with a quiet breath and trembling resolve, Elena began to cross the room toward them, unaware that this would be the first step into a storm she could no longer avoid. Margaret Langley stood near the center of the ballroom like a queen at court, her every gesture deliberate, her every glance commanding attention. The midnight blue silk of her gown shimmered under the chandeliers, pearls tracing the elegant line of her throat. Around her clustered her daughters Isabel and Claire, both flawless reflections of their mother's poise and pride. Elena hesitated at the edge of the crowd, watching them from a distance. The three women laughed together, surrounded by well-dressed guests eager to flatter and be seen. Their voices blended with the music, melodic, controlled and faintly cruel. For a brief second, Elena considered retreating. She could disappear into the crowd, pretend to look for someone, maybe wait until Daniel arrived. But then she remembered why she was here. Daniel's family would see any hesitation as weakness, and weakness was blood in the water. She squared her shoulders and walked toward them, clutching her small evening bag like a lifeline. "Good evening, Mrs. Langley," she said softly, her voice steady despite the quick rhythm of her heartbeat. "You look wonderful tonight." Margaret turned, her painted smile curving like a blade. "Elena," she drawled, as though tasting the name and finding it bitter. "How lovely of you to join us." The pause between her words was surgical, long enough to remind everyone nearby that Elena's presence was barely tolerated. Before Elena could reply, Margaret raised her glass and turned to the small circle of guests surrounding her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said brightly, her tone laced with theatrical charm, "I think we should all toast to this remarkable woman, the courier girl who captured my son's heart." A few people laughed politely, unsure if it was safe not to. Elena froze. The words hit like a slap, soft and public. Her stomach twisted, but she forced a smile. "That's very kind of you," she murmured, her voice even, though her fingers dug into the silk of her clutch. Claire, the younger sister, always the one with the cruelest smile, leaned forward. "So Elena," she said, tilting her head, "tell me, where is Daniel?" "Too busy with another of his mysterious projects." Isabel snickered, pretending to sip her drink. "You'd think he'd make time for family, or at least for his wife. Unless he's decided business is more interesting company." Their laughter chimed softly, like silver bells dipped in poison. Elena met their eyes one by one. Her face remained calm, her smile poised, but inside she could feel the sting of humiliation spreading like fire. "He'll be here soon," she said simply. "You know how he is when he's chasing perfection." Margaret arched a brow. "Perfection?" she echoed, her tone dripping with implication. "Yes, I suppose that's what we all chase, isn't it?" The conversation dissolved into polite chuckles. Elena stood still for another moment, every instinct screaming to leave, to breathe, to hide. But she didn't. Instead, she reached for a passing waiter's tray, took a glass of champagne, and raised it with quiet grace. "To family," she said. Margaret's smile faltered just slightly. The daughters exchanged a look. Elena held her gaze a moment longer before taking a small, deliberate sip. Her hands were steady now. Then, without waiting for their dismissal, she turned and drifted toward the far side of the ballroom, where laughter felt a little less sharp, and the air didn't sting quite so much. Behind her, she heard Isabel whisper something and Claire giggle, but she didn't look back. She'd survived worse than mockery. Still, as the string quartet swelled into a waltz, a single thought kept circling her mind like a haunting refrain. "Where are you, Daniel?" She needed him here. She just didn't know that before the night ended, she would discover strength far greater than his presence could offer. The orchestra shifted into a livelier rhythm, and laughter rippled through the ballroom like champagne bubbles. Couples danced under the chandeliers while waiters refilled glasses with mechanical grace. The wedding celebration gleamed on the surface, but beneath it, Elena could feel the undertow of whispers and judgment tugging at her from every direction. She found a seat at one of the tables near the edge of the room, grateful for the brief illusion of solitude. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her clutch. The golden place cards glittered under the candlelight, Langley family table. Of course, there was no escaping them. "Elena, darling, sitting alone already?" The syrupy voice drifted toward her before she even looked up. Isabel approached, followed by Claire, both holding fresh glasses of champagne, and matching smiles sharp enough to cut glass. "You know, most people mingle," Claire added, lowering herself gracefully into the chair beside Elena. It's not good to appear distant. Elena smiled thinly. Just catching my breath. It's been a long evening. Oh, I'm sure, Isabel said, leaning in conspiratorially. All these events must feel a little overwhelming. So many important people, so much etiquette. You must miss the simplicity of your old job. Elena's spine stiffened. I'm perfectly fine, thank you. Claire's smile widened. Of course you are. You've adapted beautifully. But you can't blame people for being curious. It's quite the transformation, from courier to Langley. The words dripped with mock sweetness. Elena kept her expression serene, though her heart pounded so loudly she thought they might hear it. I suppose life has a way of surprising us, she said calmly. Sometimes it takes us places we never imagined. Or people, Isabel added with a pointed glance toward her. You certainly found the right one to take you there. They laughed soft, practiced cruel. Elena reached for her champagne and took a deliberate sip, pretending not to hear them. But the sting of humiliation crept in all the same. Every smile in that room felt rehearsed, every conversation a test she was destined to fail. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement near the bar, a familiar silhouette. Veronica. The ex-wife was radiant in silver, surrounded by admirers, her laughter carrying easily above the music. She had a way of filling space, confident, magnetic, dangerous. The kind of woman who didn't need to speak to remind everyone she once belonged here. Their eyes met for the briefest moment across the room. Veronica's lips curved into a smile, slow, knowing, predatory. Elena looked away, pretending to study the dance floor, but the unease in her chest deepened. It wasn't just jealousy that glimmered behind that smile. It was calculation. The music swelled, and the master of ceremonies announced the arrival of the newlyweds. The crowd erupted into applause, and everyone rose to their feet. Elena joined them, clapping politely as the bride and groom, radiant and young, entered the room. The moment provided a welcome distraction, but her relief was fleeting. When the guests began taking their seats again, she realized Veronica had made her way to Margaret's side. The two women stood close, their heads bent together, voices low, expressions composed. From where Elena sat, it almost looked like they were sharing a secret. Her stomach tightened. There was history between them. She could feel it, sense it in the way Margaret's face softened slightly when she looked at Veronica, in the way Veronica's hand brushed the older woman's arm with casual familiarity. Whatever that connection was, it wasn't over. Elena turned her gaze back to the table, her reflection trembling in the glass before her. She took another sip of champagne, this time slower, steadier. If this was a game, she told herself she'd play it. But she would not let them see her flinch again. Not Margaret. Not the sisters. And certainly not Veronica. The night had grown heavier. The air thick with perfume, laughter, and the faint sharpness of envy that always bloomed in rooms full of beautiful people pretending to adore each other. The bride and groom were dancing now, a sea of guests swaying around them in glittering waves. Elena sat quietly at the edge of it all, watching the rhythm of the evening unfold. The orchestra played something slow and elegant, but her thoughts were anything but calm. Daniel still hadn't arrived. Her phone, hidden discreetly in her clutch, showed nothing but silence. No message, no call. She stared at the screen until the glow began to hurt her eyes. Then, needing air, she rose. The ballroom doors opened to a quiet corridor lined with mirrors and tall vases of orchids. The music dulled behind her as she slipped out, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She wandered toward the terrace, where a few guests had stepped out for cigarettes or secret conversations. The night outside was warm, the scent of salt from the nearby sea threading through the air. She leaned against the balustrade, letting the soft wind cool her cheeks. It was there, between the murmur of voices and the rustle of silk, that she heard them. Two women, speaking in hushed tones just beyond the terrace archway. She didn't mean to listen, but the sound of her name made her freeze. "Elena," came Veronica's smooth voice, half amusement, half contempt. "I told you this would happen." Daniel's little charity project finally starting to crack. A pause. Then Margaret's quieter, measured reply. "She's trying, I'll give her that. But trying isn't enough in our world. Daniel may think with his heart, but that won't protect the family if she slips. And she will." Elena's breath caught. Then why not just tell him? Veronica said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. Let him see what she really is. You've seen her past, haven't you? You know who she was. I've seen enough, Margaret replied sharply. But exposing her would make Daniel defensive. He needs to come to the realization himself. People like Elena. A pause. They always reveal their true nature eventually. Veronica laughed softly. You almost sound fond of her. Don't mistake patience for fondness, Margaret said coldly. I'm protecting my son. And our name. There was a clink, the sound of crystal glasses meeting. Still, Veronica mused. If you ever change your mind, I'd be happy to help expedite things. I know a few ways to make the truth louder. Elena's pulse hammered in her ears. The air suddenly felt too thin. She took a small, unsteady step backward, careful not to make a sound. But her heel brushed against the edge of a fallen leaf, a faint crunch. The conversation stopped. Elena. Veronica's voice was sharp now, echoing softly under the archway. Is someone there? Elena held her breath, pressing herself against the column's shadow. Her heart thudded wildly. She could hear their footsteps approaching. A second later, she turned and slipped back into the ballroom, forcing herself to move calmly, gracefully, as though she'd only stepped out to adjust her hair. When she glanced over her shoulder, Veronica stood in the doorway, her silver dress shimmering under the light, eyes scanning the crowd. Their gazes met, only for a second. But in that moment, Elena knew. Veronica had seen her. And worse, she smiled. Not the polite, public smile she wore for appearances. This one was thin, deliberate, and full of promise. A warning. Or a game beginning. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for another glass of champagne. The bubbles burned her throat as she swallowed, her thoughts racing. They were planning something, Margaret and Veronica both. And if Daniel didn't come soon, she would be facing it alone. The music had changed, slower now, wistful, like a memory fading beneath candlelight. Each note seemed to remind Elena of the one thing missing from the night. Daniel. His place at the family table remained empty, the untouched glass of champagne catching the golden light of the chandeliers. Every time the ballroom doors opened, her heart leapt, maybe now. But each time it was someone else. Business partners, distant relatives, the same perfect strangers with polite smiles. Never him. She slipped her phone from her clutch, hiding it beneath the tablecloth. No signal. No messages. Her last text to him that morning still lingered on the screen. Don't be late tonight. Promise me you'll come early. His reply had come minutes later. I'll be there by 8. Wait for me at the entrance. It was almost 10. Elena stood abruptly, ignoring the curious glances from nearby guests, and moved toward the exit. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, a steady rhythm that barely disguised the pounding in her chest. In the corridor, the music faded to a distant hum. Her reflection in the mirrors looked like that of another woman, pale, composed, but with fear trembling just beneath the surface. She called him. Once. Twice. Each time it rang and then cut to silence. And then a sound. A soft ping. A new message. Unknown number. If you want to know where Daniel is, go to the terrace. Now. For a moment she just stared. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. Who was this? Why not Daniel himself? And how did they know what she wanted to ask? She hesitated only a second, then turned and started walking. The terrace doors stood half open, the night air rolling in warm and heavy with the scent of sea salt and roses. A few guests stood outside smoking, their laughter low and private. Elena stepped into the shadows, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. 2 men in dark suits, hotel security, stood near the railing. One spoke into a radio. The other noticed her approach and straightened. Excuse me, she said softly, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. I'm looking for my husband, Mr. Langley. Have you seen him leave? The guard frowned slightly, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Langley left about an hour ago. Her pulse faltered. Left? She repeated. Was he alone? The man hesitated. No, ma'am. There was someone with him. A silence thick enough to choke on. Her fingers clenched around her clutch. Who? I'm sorry, ma'am. he said gently, looking away. I didn't catch her name. Her mouth went dry. It wasn't possible. He wouldn't just leave. Not tonight. But in her chest, something cold and sharp whispered that yes, he would. He already had. Through the open doors she could still hear the faint murmur of music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. And then a sound that froze her blood. A laugh. Soft, elegant, unmistakable. Veronica. Elena turned toward the ballroom. Through the window she saw her, the silver dress gleaming, her head tilted in amusement, a phone in her hand. At that moment the truth pressed against her heart like a blade. Veronica knew. And then her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. Now you understand who he was with. The words blurred before her eyes. She stared at the glowing screen until the letters swam out of focus, until the sound of the party felt like it came from another world. Then she lowered the phone slowly, her hands no longer trembling, not from fear, but from something colder. Not grief, not even betrayal. Resolve. A storm was coming. And this time she wasn't going to hide from it. The next morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of dawn that carried the taste of last night's mistakes. Elena hadn't slept, not a second. She'd sat by the window of her hotel suite all night, watching the ocean fade from black to silver, trying to make sense of what she'd seen, what she now knew. Daniel had left the reception with Veronica. And someone who clearly wanted her to know, had made sure she found out. Her mind replayed every detail. The guard's hesitant tone, the message from the unknown number, the glint in Veronica's eyes. None of it added up unless it was all meant to. At 6 a.m. she finally stood. The mirror reflected a pale stranger with shadowed eyes and a clenched jaw. She brushed her hair back, applied just enough makeup to look controlled, then reached for her phone. She opened her contacts, scrolled to Daniel's name, hovered over call, and then stopped. No, not yet. She needed proof before she confronted him. Evidence. Something solid enough that he couldn't talk his way out of it. So she started where she knew she had to, with Veronica. By mid-morning she was in the city. The rain had started to fall in a thin, whispering drizzle, blurring the glass towers around her. Veronica's art gallery stood near the waterfront, all white marble and steel, the kind of place that tried to look timeless but reeked of new money. Elena walked in as though she belonged there. The receptionist, a young man with perfectly styled hair, barely looked up. Good morning, Elena said, her tone steady. Is Miss Sterling in? She has a private meeting, he replied automatically. Elena Smiled Dinley. Then tell her Elena Langley is here. The effect was instant. The young man froze, eyes widening slightly before he pressed a button on the intercom. Moments later, the glass doors to the upper office clicked open. Veronica was waiting at the top of the stairs, effortlessly perfect as always. A tailored cream suit, a hint of diamonds at her wrist, that same smile that never quite reached her eyes. Elena, she purred. What a surprise. Didn't think I'd see you so soon after last night's festivities. Elena climbed the stairs, each step deliberate. I'm sure you didn't. Veronica tilted her head. Still upset your husband didn't show? I know he left with you, Elena said evenly. Don't bother denying it. For a moment the mask slipped. Veronica's eyes flickered, not guilt, not even fear. Amusement. Left with me? She repeated softly. Oh, darling. You make it sound scandalous. It is scandalous. Veronica took a slow step forward, her perfume heavy with jasmine and power. You really think Daniel would choose me over you? After everything? That's almost flattering. Stop playing games, Elena snapped. Where did you take him? For a heartbeat the air between them stilled, thick, sharp, dangerous. Then Veronica laughed, low and silvery. You're asking the wrong questions. What's that supposed to mean? It means, sweetheart, she whispered, leaning closer, that maybe your husband isn't as innocent as you think. Maybe he's the one who should be explaining where he went, and why. Elena's breath caught. You're lying. Maybe. Veronica's eyes glinted. But if you want answers, you'll have to dig deeper than me. Try his office. Or better yet, ask him about Project Orion. The name hit Elena like a jolt. What's that? But Veronica only smiled, cold, triumphant. You'll see. Eventually. She turned away, her heels clicking against the marble as she disappeared into her office, leaving Elena standing there, heart racing, thoughts spinning. Project Orion. She'd never heard of it. But the way Veronica said it, the way she smiled, told Elena it mattered. She pulled out her phone, opened a search bar and typed the words in. No results. Then a new message flashed across the screen. Unknown number. You're getting close. But be careful. The truth can ruin more than lies ever could. Elena's fingers tightened around the phone. The rain outside had turned to a storm, the sound of thunder rolling over the bay. She didn't know who was watching her, but she knew one thing for certain now. Daniel was hiding something, and she was done pretending she didn't see it. The storm had passed, leaving the city slick and shining beneath a pale morning sun. Elena's mind, however, was still in chaos. Project Orion. The name reverberated in her thoughts like a code she had yet to decipher. Every instinct screamed that it was connected to Daniel, to Veronica, and to the dangerous undercurrents she had glimpsed at the wedding. She had no choice now but to dive deeper. Her first stop was Daniel's private office in the financial district, a space she had only ever entered with his permission. The sleek glass doors reflected her tense expression as she stepped inside. The room was empty, save for the faint smell of his cologne and the stack of unopened mail on his desk. Elena walked to the desk, eyes scanning every file, every folder. She knew she was taking a risk. Trespassing here could anger Daniel, or worse, reveal something that someone didn't want her to see. But she had to know. A folder caught her attention. It was thin, unmarked, and tucked behind a larger binder labeled Langley Ventures Confidential. She slid it out carefully. On the cover, in neat, embossed letters, was a single word. Orion. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were spreadsheets, contracts and diagrams, all pointing to offshore accounts, shell companies, and transactions that bypassed the official ledgers. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars shifted, often labeled as consulting fees or administrative costs. But the deeper she scrolled, the clearer it became. Someone was siphoning funds from Daniel's empire, and the trail led straight to Veronica Sterling. Elena's stomach turned. Veronica wasn't just Daniel's ex. She was orchestrating a scheme, using Margaret's trust and Daniel's naivety to manipulate the family's finances. Each document she uncovered painted a picture of calculated deception, of careful planning. Her heart raced as she realized the stakes. This wasn't a simple love triangle or a personal betrayal. This was a full-blown conspiracy. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Elena froze, sliding the folder back into its hiding place. The office door opened slowly. Daniel. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled, but his eyes immediately found hers. Elena. His voice was calm, but there was tension underneath. What are you doing here? Elena stood her ground, clutching the folder behind her back. I know about Project Orion, she said steadily. I know about Veronica. And I know she's been using you, manipulating your family finances. Daniel's face went pale, then hardened. You shouldn't have looked at that, he said, his tone low. It's complicated. You don't understand. I understand enough. Elena shot back. She's dangerous, Daniel. She's been lying to you, to your mother, to everyone. And she's not finished. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't know the whole story. I know enough, Elena interrupted, stepping closer. And I won't let her destroy what you've built. Or what we have. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he finally sighed. You're right, he admitted. I've been blind. I wanted to believe it was over, that she was gone. But she's clever, and she's ruthless. You've just given me the clarity I've been missing. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Then we stop her. Together. Daniel nodded. Together. In that moment, the storm of uncertainty and fear that had gripped Elena began to clear. She felt a surge of determination. Project Orion was no longer a mystery she had to fear. It was a challenge she was ready to confront. And for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had Daniel beside her. Truly beside her. As an ally, not just a husband. The Langley estate had never looked so tense. The grand hall, usually alive with laughter and celebrations, now felt like a stage set for confrontation. Crystal chandeliers reflected the morning sun, scattering shards of light across the polished floor. But there was no warmth in the room, only the electric tension of a storm about to break. Elena stood beside Daniel, her emerald dress striking against the pale marble. Her heart raced, not with fear this time, but with controlled determination. The folders and evidence she had uncovered in Daniel's office rested in a secure case, ready to expose the full extent of Veronica's deception. Across the room, Veronica Sterling's silver suit gleamed as brightly as ever. Her smile was still poised, but her eyes betrayed the slightest flicker of unease. She had sensed that Elena had discovered something, that the quiet woman she once dismissed as naive had grown dangerous. Margaret Langley watched from the side, her hands clasped, lips pressed into a thin line. For years, she had wielded influence over the family with an imperious grace. But even she now seemed uncertain, sensing the shift in power. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "This ends now." Elena followed his lead. "Veronica," she said, her tone firm, unwavering. "All of your schemes have been uncovered. The offshore accounts, the siphoning of family funds, the lies you've spread. It's all here." Veronica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "You think you can scare me with paperwork?" she said smoothly, masking panic with mockery. Daniel ignored her. "You've manipulated my mother, used my trust, and tried to steal from this family. But your plan ends today. The authorities have been notified, and your access to any of the accounts has been frozen." Elena stepped closer, meeting Veronica's gaze directly. "No more games. You will leave this family, this estate, and this company. And you will answer for everything you've done." Veronica's composure cracked. For the first time, she looked vulnerable. "You," she began, but Margaret's voice cut through the tension. "Enough," Margaret said, her tone surprisingly measured. "I will not have my family torn apart over your vendetta, Veronica. Leave. Now." Veronica's eyes flickered between Elena and Daniel. She took a step back, realization dawning that the game was truly over. Slowly, deliberately, she turned on her heel and left, her silver heels clicking against the marble, each step marking the end of her influence. The room exhaled. Daniel took Elena's hand, gripping it tightly. "You were amazing," he said quietly. "I don't know how I would have faced this without you." Elena's lips curved into a relieved smile. "We faced it together. That's what matters." Margaret approached them, her expression softened. "Elena," she said almost grudgingly, "you've proven yourself. I see now that Daniel chose well. I will support you moving forward." Elena nodded, feeling a surge of triumph. The weight of fear, of humiliation, of betrayal. It all lifted. She was no longer the outsider, the timid woman watching from the shadows. She was in control, respected, and safe. Daniel pulled her close, whispering in her ear. "This is just the beginning, my love. But with you I feel unstoppable." Elena smiled, finally letting herself believe it. The storm had passed, leaving them stronger, united, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The Langley family's world was shaken, but a new balance had been restored. One forged by courage, love, and the unbreakable bond between Elena and Daniel. And as the sun streamed through the grand windows, Elena knew she had earned her place, not just as Daniel's wife, but as a true force in the world she had once only dreamed of entering. Let me know how you liked my story. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. A new story will be posted here tomorrow.